Daniel had always been drawn to old buildings. There was something about the creaking floors, the smell of dust and aged wood, and the faint echo of stories long forgotten. So when he saw the apartment listing for the building on Edgewood Street, he felt a thrill he hadn't felt in years. The rent was too cheap to be true. The windows looked cracked, the paint was peeling, but he didn't care. He liked the character, the sense that this building had a history, a presence that no modern complex could provide. The first night he moved in was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The building had a strange energy, a hum he couldn't explain. He unpacked his things, arranged the furniture, and as he sat on the edge of his bed, he felt it, the sensation of being watched. He shook it off as nerves. Old buildings creak and moan, he told himself. The shadows dance. There was nothing else. But then the knocking started. Soft at first, almost polite, but insistent. 3 taps on the door, followed by a pause, then 3 more. Daniel frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the landlord had given him the keys. He approached cautiously, heart hammering. "Hello?" he called out. No answer. The knocking stopped. He opened the door, empty hallway. A cold chill swept past him. He shivered, telling himself it was the draft from the old windows. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The next day, he explored the building. The hallways were narrow, dimly lit, and filled with shadows that seemed to shift. Every door had carvings, symbols he didn't recognize, etched into the wood. Some looked ancient, some recent. He ran his fingers over them, feeling a faint vibration, as if the building itself were alive beneath his touch. At the end of the hall was a door unlike the others. It was smooth, dark, and seemed to almost glow faintly. Daniel paused. Something about it drew him, even though every instinct screamed danger. That night, the knocking returned. This time it was louder, closer, almost inside his room. Daniel sat frozen on the bed, staring at the door. The knocking became a rhythm, echoing his heartbeat. Then came whispers, soft, unintelligible at first, but growing clearer with each moment. Come. See. Do not resist. His chest tightened. The shadows along the walls began moving, stretching and twisting. They weren't just shadows. They were shapes, almost humanoid, leaning out of the corners, peering at him. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the door at the end of the hallway. It pulsed faintly in the darkness, as if breathing, waiting for him. Daniel tried to focus on reality, but every sound, every flicker of movement reminded him that the building was no ordinary structure. By the 3rd day, Daniel's routine had changed. He avoided the hallways when possible, but sometimes he would see a shadow moving at the edge of his vision. Doors he hadn't noticed before appeared, and corridors twisted in impossible ways. No matter where he went, he always ended up at the door. He began noticing carvings in the plaster of the walls. They glowed faintly in the dim light, forming patterns he couldn't understand. Sometimes he swore he heard whispers coming from them, calling his name, urging him closer. The building's presence was growing stronger. Objects in his apartment shifted when he wasn't looking. Furniture moved slightly. Items he had placed carefully were not where he left them. He tried to leave, but stepping outside felt wrong. The streets beyond seemed distorted, older, decayed. Time had changed. That night, Daniel faced the glowing door again. He felt a pull, irresistible and terrifying. The whispers were louder now, commanding, hypnotic. Step closer. See what waits for you. You cannot turn back. His fingers trembled as he reached for the handle. A cold wind brushed a face. The shadows leaned in closer. Every instinct screamed danger. And yet, he stepped forward. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a space that looked like his apartment, but wrong. Dimmer, distorted, objects rearranged, shadows moving where no light should reach. He stepped in, and the air thickened, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. The shadows whispered louder, circling him. He noticed footprints appearing on the floor, not his own. They moved, following him. Hours, maybe days passed. He couldn't tell. Time seemed to fold in on itself. The shadows grew stronger, more defined. They formed shapes, faces of people he had wronged, memories he had buried, fears he had tried to ignore. The building wasn't just watching him, it was testing him. Every fear, every regret, every mistake was laid bare. He felt himself unraveling piece by piece, but the building didn't destroy him. It wanted something more. Finally, he came to a room filled with mirrors. Each reflected a different version of him. Fearful, broken, desperate, proud, lost. One mirror moved independently, mocking him, shaking its head. The whispers became words, clear and direct. See yourself, truly. Daniel stepped closer, staring into the largest mirror. At first, nothing unusual. Then, faces appeared. His mistakes, the people he had hurt, the regrets he had hidden even from himself. And worst of all, he saw himself, the man shaped by fear and guilt. He wanted to look away, to escape, but the floor seemed to pull him forward. The shadows pressed closer, almost suffocating. And then, he saw a faint light in the distance. A way out? Or another trap? He didn't know, but the pull was stronger than his fear. He took a step forward, then another, toward the light, toward the unknown, unaware of what waited for him beyond. Daniel's heart pounded as he stepped toward the faint light at the end of the mirrored room. Shadows writhed around him, stretching impossibly long, twisting into shapes that felt alive. Each step forward felt like walking through molasses, every movement resisted by an unseen force. The light flickered and pulsed, almost beckoning him, but the closer he got, the more distorted the room became. Walls shifted, floors dipped and rose, and ceilings bent in impossible angles. It was as if the building itself were testing him, pushing him toward fear, forcing him to confront every insecurity he had ever buried. From the corners of the room, faint whispers turned into voices. Not ordinary voices, but fragments of Daniel's memories. A neighbor from childhood, scolding him. A friend he betrayed, whispering accusations. A stranger, a victim of his negligence, crying silently. Each voice twisted with time, distorted, haunting, echoing through the vast, impossible space. Daniel wanted to cover his ears, to block them out, but the sounds seeped into him regardless. It was everywhere, inside his head, in the shadows, and even beneath his skin. He realized the building was more than haunted. It was aware, alive, and it wanted something. He focused on the glowing door ahead, ignoring the murmurs and the shift in shadows. With every step, he noticed his own reflection in the fragmented mirrors along the walls. Each reflection seemed to move independently, mimicking not just his motions, but his emotions, exaggerating his fears. His anxious glance became a twisted grin in the mirror. His trembling became convulsions. Daniel stopped for a moment, trying to steady himself. "This isn't real," he whispered, though his own voice sounded distant, as if underwater. The reflections mocked him. The shadows hissed, and yet the door waited. The first door he had encountered in this strange hallway glowed faintly to his right. Its carvings pulsated with an almost heartbeat-like rhythm. He reached out to touch them, desperate for guidance. The moment his fingers brushed the symbols, a wave of energy coursed through him. Images of doors, hallways, and rooms flashed in his mind, some familiar, some alien. He understood. These symbols were keys, maps to navigate the ever-shifting labyrinth. But the building's influence was growing stronger, and even following the symbols felt like swimming against a violent tide. Daniel moved cautiously, noticing details that had escaped him before. Shadows weren't just around him. They lurked inside walls, inside cracks, even inside the mirrors. Some seemed to watch him directly, others whispered in tongues he could almost understand. He passed a door that appeared to be his childhood home. Inside, he saw himself as a boy, screaming at a figure he had long forgotten. The shadow of the figure reached out of the doorway, beckoning him forward. He recoiled but pressed on, heart hammering. He realized that the building's corridors were alive, reshaping based on his actions and reactions. Every hesitation, every glance, every step was recorded and responded to. Hours, or maybe minutes, he couldn't tell, passed in distorted time. His sense of hunger, thirst, and fatigue vanished, replaced by a growing dread. The walls seemed to breathe around him, expanding and contracting like a living lung. Shadows coalesced into shapes, some human, some monstrous, all whispering his sins. Daniel felt them reaching for him. He ducked, sprinted, and stumbled, only to find the hallway stretching endlessly before him. Nothing stayed the same. The rules of physics, of time, of reality no longer applied. Then the floor beneath him cracked. He fell, tumbling into a vast room that shimmered like water. Shadows swirled in the depths below, whispering promises of despair. Yet above, the faint glow of another door promised escape. He climbed out of the watery void, realizing that fear was a tangible force here, something the building could manipulate. Every hesitation allowed the shadows to grow stronger, every doubt a foothold for the building to tighten its grip. At last, he reached a room lined with mirrors, more extensive than the last. The reflections now spoke, not just whispering, but uttering full sentences, accusing him of his past mistakes. You abandoned her. You lied. You failed. Each reflection contained a version of him shaped by regret, fear, and guilt. Daniel shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know, he stammered. But the building wasn't interested in excuses. It wanted recognition, acceptance, confrontation. He approached the largest mirror, and his reflection stepped out of it, solid and tangible. It mimicked him perfectly, but carried the weight of all his regrets. The shadow Daniel spoke, voice deep and distorted. You cannot hide. You cannot run. You must face yourself. The room pulsed. The floor trembled. Shadows surged to surround him, clawing at his clothes, his skin, his mind. Daniel staggered, struggling to maintain focus. He realized that acknowledging his fear was only the first step. He had to confront it, understand it, and move forward despite it. In a moment of clarity, Daniel focused on the glowing patterns he had noticed on doors earlier. He traced them with his eyes and followed them mentally through the labyrinth. The building recoiled slightly, as if aware that he had found a method, a weakness in its control. He moved deliberately, step by step, guided by instinct and the glowing symbols. Shadows hissed and lunged, yet he forced his pace, ignoring pain, ignoring the nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. Ahead, He saw a faint outline of a doorway unlike any other he had encountered. Its frame pulsed with a strange, almost sentient light. Daniel's hand shook as he approached. The shadows surged to block him, forming humanoid shapes with twisted, faceless heads. He pushed through, feeling the building's will pressing against him, threatening to pull him into the darkness forever. He stepped through the doorway and entered a room that seemed impossibly vast. The floor was a mirror of shadows, undulating like waves, yet solid beneath his feet. The air was thick, vibrating with energy. At the center of the room, a figure waited, immense, dark, radiating power. Its presence pressed on him, like the weight of centuries of captured souls. Daniel knew instinctively this was the heart of the building, the source of its awareness and terror. Every corridor, every shadow, every whispered word had led him here. The shadows around him writhed and lunged. Faces from his past appeared in the darkness, accusing, pleading, mocking. Daniel clenched his fists, grounding himself in the one thing the building could not touch: his will. "I will not be consumed," he whispered, his voice shaking but firm. The figure at the center stirred. The floor beneath Daniel shivered. Whispers turned to words, then sentences. "You cannot leave. You cannot escape. Face yourself or remain forever." Daniel felt the building's full weight, his mind assaulted by every failure, every fear, every regret. Yet he forced one step forward, then another. The shadows recoiled slightly as he advanced. His focus on the glowing symbols anchored him, a lifeline in the sea of chaos. Light shimmered faintly ahead, beyond the central figure. Daniel lunged forward, hand outstretched. The shadows hissed, shrieking. With every ounce of strength, he pushed through, and the room trembled violently. The oppressive energy pressed, trying to bend his mind, to crush him into submission. But he refused. One step, two. He reached the faint light, and for the first time, he felt a moment of relief. A doorway appeared, shimmering with possibility. Daniel stepped toward it, and the shadows surged once more, clawing, whispering, yet parting just enough to let him pass. He crossed the threshold and emerged into a corridor that looked almost normal. But the building had left its mark. Shadows lingered at the edges of his vision, whispers echoed faintly, and a sense of unease clung to him like a second skin. Daniel realized the journey had only begun. The building was patient. It would wait, and he would need all his courage, wits, and strength to face the horrors yet to come.